So for those of you just joining, my name is Julie. I'm a yoga teacher and I teach a lot of breathwork and meditation. And I'm just here to guide you through a short breathwork session and talk a little bit about the sort of science of breathing in a quite short described session. And hopefully you'll leave with a bit of practical tools that you can take with you going forwards, but also a little bit more information about why this might be important. If you've got any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I'll see if I can get to those if there's time before or after, or at the beginning, at the end. But otherwise, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. So taking your time to get settled, finding somewhere comfy to sit, but that preferably you can sit with a nice long spine. And then we'll get started in a little bit. I know that the conference has been going on for an hour's time, so hopefully you'll still have some energy for these 20 minutes here. So we'll just start in a couple of minutes, running till about 20 past 12. Notice on my tabs I have a lot of things open so that I don't get distracted by that. There we are. So just give one more minute to let anyone else who wants to join, and then we will make a start. So just in this last minute here, if there's any questions at all about the practice, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll get started in just a moment. So just giving one more minute to let anyone else who'd like to join. And then we'll get started. And we'll start with just a little bit of background about what we're doing. So I hope you're up for listening to me a little bit. And then we'll do some practical work. It's super accessible and really easy to do and safe. So you don't need to be a breathwork expert at all to participate. Great, so it's just getting to 12 o'clock, so let's make a start. Just make sure that you can sit somewhere where the spine is fairly long. So if you're sitting on a sofa, you tend to slouch back, just come forward a little bit so you get a little bit of lengthening of the spine. And if possible, have your feet kind of grounding into the floor, whatever kind of surface is beneath you. It's nice to have something to settle into. So welcome to the session. We just have about 20 minutes. So we'll get to some practical work in a moment, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about why this work is quite important. I was teaching a breathwork session last month when someone said, I've been breathing since I was born, so for about 40 years. Why do I need to learn how to breathe? And it's true that it's something that happens automatically, but so many of us actually breathe not to the full capacity, and there's so much more we can get out of the breathing if you do that a little bit more consciously. So when we talk about breathing, I find it really important to talk about the autonomic nervous system. You might have heard about the two main modes, the sympathetic, which is sort of the fight and flight mode, and the parasympathetic, which is really the rest and digest mode. So these are the two different kinds of main modes of being in. And ideally, we want to live about 95% of our lives in a parasympathetic nervous system, so where we feel calm, connected, rested, and about sort of the last 5% or so in the sympathetic nervous system, only when we need it. So that's really designed for if we're in fear, if we're in danger, if we're anxious, if there's something that we need to use a bit more cortisol or those kind of stress hormones for, we switch into the sympathetic nervous system. But what that does is that it switches off some of the other functions of the autonomic nervous system. So it switches off our digestion, our metabolism, our blood pressure can rise quite a lot. And also the autonomic nervous system regulates our body temperature. So that can really sort of go off as well when we're in the sympathetic nervous system. So when we breathe a bit more fully and deeply, we can activate something called the vagus nerve. This is quite an important part of the body. It regulates lots of things, but most importantly, it helps us drop into the parasympathetic nervous system, so where we find that rest and digest. So simply being able to breathe slower, longer, deeper breaths can just help us spend more time. And it's as simple as that in the parasympathetic nervous system. So do drop me a message if any of that doesn't make sense. You can read much more about that if you just Google it. But essentially what we're doing is we're going to be, sorry, that's my buzzer. We're going to be breathing a little bit more into the lower part of the belly to find a little bit more fullness of the breath. And when we breathe more into the belly, away from the chest, that's when you get more of an oxygen exchange. We can begin to increase our lung capacity. And we can also regulate our blood pressure a little bit. So if you're someone who's living with high blood pressure, finding a slower, deeper breath, sorry, my husband's going to get the buzzer. Finding a slower, deeper breath can really help regulate the breathing and drop into the parasympathetic nervous system. I'll talk a little bit more about the kind of benefits of that at the end as well if there's time. But just before we start, just take a couple of roll back of the shoulders, maybe dropping the head a little bit from side to side. Just kind of easing out any tension that might be in the shoulders. So just for a couple of moments, letting the head drop out, rolling the shoulders. Just so you can find somewhere that's a tall spine, kind of lengthening the head away. So if you had a bun like me, lifting up and dropping the shoulders down. And if you just place your hand somewhere on the body, so I'll talk the screen for a moment so you can see. So maybe one hand on the belly, one hand to the heart center or the sternum. And just take a moment to eyes open or closed. Tune into your breath. So the nice thing about having hands here is that we can sort of find a tactile way of noticing how the breath is doing. So notice if you feel your breath more in your chest area or more in the belly area. And throughout this practice, we're going to encourage the breath to really sink down into the belly, away from the chest. So just for now, just kind of noticing, where do you feel the breath the most? Is that somewhere in the chest or is that somewhere in the belly? And take another couple of breaths to notice any other details you might pick up about the breath. Maybe notice something about the quality of the breath or the pace of the breath, how fast or slow it is. And just knowing that this practice is really for you to deepen, slow down the breath a little bit and increase your lung capacity. So just take 2 big breaths there, in through the nose, then sigh out through the mouth, letting the shoulders drop down. One more just like this. Inhaling through the nose, nice and deep. And sighing out through the mouth. Good, you can release the hands there. So the first breath technique we're going to come to is called triangular breath. It's not recommended if anyone's pregnant. In that case, just skip this one out and count, but without any breath retention. But basically, we're going to be breathing in for the count of 4. We're going to hold the breath for the count of 4, and then we're going to breathe out for the count of 4. So it's a bit like a triangle. If you imagine the 3 lines of a triangle, we breathe in for the count of 4. We're going to breathe out for the count of 4. Hold for the count of 4 and then breathing out for the count of 4. So there's a bit of breath retention in between. And essentially when we practice breath retention consciously, we work with expanding our lung capacity to make that a little bit bigger and a little bit fuller. So I'll do this with you as well. You can do this eyes open or closed as before, just making sure you have that long spine and the soles of the feet flat on the floor. So we're going to take a breath in for the count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold the breath for 4, 3, 2, 1. Then breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4. Just that again. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold the breath for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4. Twice more. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold the breath 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4. Last one. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold the breath 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4. Just take a normal breath in through the nose and then sigh out through the mouth, dropping the shoulders down. So that's triangular breathing. It's quite a simple way to just work to increase the lung capacity. If the count of 4 felt really great, then keeping that. If you notice that actually felt like you were straining the lungs to get enough air in or out, then drop down to the count of 3. So it doesn't have to be super long to begin with, but we're aiming to increasing it a little bit. Equally, if you're ready, you can breathe with nice long breaths. You could kind of add that up to 5 or 6 counts, but just making sure that every inhale, every breath retention, and every exhale is the same length. So that's triangular breathing. We're going to carry on a little bit from that with something called box breath or square breath. So essentially the same thing, but we have 2 breath retentions in there. And so it's a little bit like breathing up and down the sides of a box. So essentially what we're going to be doing is breathing in for the count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to hold the breath for 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to breathe out for the count of 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, holding it there and then breathing out rather, and then holding at the end for 4 counts. So it's breathing in for 4, holding it for 4, breathing out for 4, and then holding it for 4. Holding the breath on an exhale or after an exhale is much harder than holding it after an inhale, because when you inhale, the lungs are full, so there's something to hold on to. When you exhale completely and then hold the breath, it's going to feel a little bit harder. So again, if you do this and notice that actually it feels a little bit difficult, drop down to the count of 3 instead. I hope that explained that well enough. I sometimes confuse myself there. So there's kind of 4 sides to the square. Breathing in, holding the breath, breathing out, and then holding the breath. If you can do this breathing in and out through the nose only, you'll get much more oxygen exchange and kind of can become a little bit easier to breathe from the belly. But if you have a blocked nose, stuffy nose, if you have a cold, then by all means do breathe from the mouth instead, if that becomes a little bit easier. I hope that makes sense. I'll do this with you as well. Before we start, take a nice big breath in and a breath out. When you're ready, take a breath in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2. Last round. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Then take a really big breath in through the nose and sigh out as you exhale. Just for a moment, come back to where we started, bringing one hand to the chest, one hand to the belly. You can close the eyes if that feels comfortable, or keeping them open. And just checking in with the breath again. Where do you feel the breath the most? Is it somewhere in the belly or somewhere in the chest? And knowing that this practice can take a little bit of time to get used to it. So don't worry if the breath hasn't automatically dropped down into the belly. Knowing that we're just aiming to become less like a chest breather, more like a full belly breather. So if you look at newborn babies, they breathe with this kind of uninhibited kind of expansiveness through the belly. They just really breathe fully through the belly and drop it down as they exhale. And often in society, we tend to suck our bellies in a lot. And essentially what that's doing is then encouraging the breath to come into the chest instead, rather than into the belly. When actually we get the full benefit if we're breathing from the belly. And so when we find the most oxygen exchange, so we get most oxygen in and letting go of stale air as we exhale. So those are kind of 2 techniques that I like to do. You can do them anytime in the day. Often doing them in the morning is really good because it kind of sets you up and immediately dropping into that parasympathetic nervous system. So it sets you up for a little bit of a calmer approach, especially if you tend to be someone who breathes a lot from the chest. If you're new to this kind of practice, when you breathe or when you do any breath work, it's nice to have the hands somewhere in the front body so you can check in with where you feel the breath. And some days might be like a little lift and a fold as you breathe. Other days might be that you can really feel the breath expanding underneath your hands. But it's a nice way to check in with the breathing. So I think we'll have time for just one more kind of breath here, a little bit more simple. You can do this through the nose or through the mouth. Again, I really encourage you to breathe through the nose if you can, in and out through the nose, as we get a little bit more conscious air in and out. So this one is just really to send the breath down into the belly. So what you're going to do is relaxing the shoulders, but take the fingertips so they're kind of drawing together and placing them onto your diaphragm. I'll tip my screen for a moment here so you can see. So my hands are sort of coming together and the fingertips just about meeting on the diaphragm. And we're going to think of the inhale as like a balloon, the whole of the ribcage being a balloon, expanding slightly outwards, so laterally to the side as you inhale. Fingertips drawing apart. And as you exhale, the jaw back in together. So it's like sipping the ribcage in together as you exhale. So we're inhaling, drawing the fingertips apart as a consequence of the belly kind of breathing upwards. And as you exhale, drawing the fingers in. So that's essentially what we're doing. Don't worry if that doesn't feel like there's much happening. Just having the hands there and knowing that we're going to think about breathing outwards, so laterally out to the side. So really filling the whole of the rib cage with air and then drawing in as you exhale. Again, you can do this eyes open or closed. If you want to just roll the shoulders back once, find that lengthening in the spine, soles of the feet firmly planted on the floor, and then placing your hands there on your diaphragm. When you're ready, take a nice big breath in. Noticing the fingertips drawing apart. And as you exhale, how the fingertips draw together. So really thinking about the diaphragm like a balloon. Inhaling, expanding like you're blowing up the balloon with air as much as you can. And exhaling, softening everything back together. And take a few more breaths there like this. And just noticing what's happening to the shoulders. Sometimes when you breathe in, the shoulders can tend to lift up a little bit. So if that's happening, make sure they really drop down, and it's just the hands moving there on the belly as a consequence of your breathing. So take a few more rounds here like this. Inhaling fully, letting the fingertips draw out laterally to the side. Exhaling as they draw back in together, so the hands are just resting onto your diaphragm. Take a few more breaths there. Inhaling fully, expanding through the hands. Exhaling completely. And take a few more. Don't worry if this feels a little bit vague or ambiguous still. Just keeping the hands there onto the belly. So we're aiming to find that little bit of a deepening and the lengthening the breath through the hands, kind of tracing the inhale, the exhale here. Taking one more like this. Inhaling. And exhaling. Good. So just to recap here, we've done 3 different kinds of breathing or breath work. One being the triangular breath, so where we breathe in for the count of 4, we hold the breath for the count of 4, and then we breathe out for the count of 4. That's the triangular breath, often talked about as breathing through the sides of a triangle, where we're really aiming to expand the lung capacity. We did the box breath or square breath, which is building on from that, which is inhaling for the count of 4, holding it for 4, breathing out for the count of 4, and then holding it for 4. Again, you can adjust those counts, so it could be 3, it could be 5 or 6. So we'll have different lung capacities, so really making that work for your lung capacity. And the last little practice we did was simply having the hands resting there on the diaphragm, feeling the expanse as you inhale, and feeling the dropping in of the hands as you exhale. So there's kind of 3 really tangible techniques. You can do them anywhere, any time of the day. You could do them on public transport. You could do them when you wake up in the morning before you go to bed. If any of you suffer a little bit from insomnia, or you just find it hard to fall asleep, especially if you have quite a restless mind, I'm definitely one of those. Doing some conscious breaths with any of these breath techniques will just help to automatically deepen and slow down the breath. And as we talked about in the beginning, when we deepen and slow down the breath, we then flip into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we really need when we're going to sleep. So in the morning, in the evening are really good times to practice these, but really any time in the day. I'm sure lots of people in this kind of society, in this model world, living with that kind of low level chronic stress, which might not feel like a lot, but it it means that we spend a lot of time with the sympathetic nervous system, which is kind of what we want to get away from. So I guess my main message here is to take a few moments every day if you can. Multiple times in the day is even better, to just connect into the breath and do any of those 3 breath techniques or breath kind of patterns. And you'll notice that if you do this over a period of time, that the counts will start to expand a little bit. But start really nice and slow. So it might be that you're starting with a count of 2 or 3, and then you gradually kind of build up from there. So really starting nice and slow. But finding that kind of full abdominal breath just really ensures that we get enough oxygen in and out. It also helps us slow down the heartbeat. So if you want to get a bit more technical about it, you could take your pulse before you do any of these, and then spend about 5-10 minutes doing these breath techniques and take the pulse at the end and checking what's there. It might be fun. It helps to stabilize the blood pressure a little bit. Again, that's connected with sort of low-level chronic stress or even higher-level stress. The blood pressure generally rises, and slow down the breath helps lower the blood pressure, just like that. Or it can be a factor that can help lower it. It also relaxes our blood vessels a little bit. So often what happens when we're in the sympathetic nervous system is that the blood can't really flow around the body well enough. So moving is a great way to increase blood circulation, because we're getting movement through the joints of different bodies, allowing the blood to flow a little bit easier. But also slow breathing, it relaxes the blood vessels so that the breath enables the blood to flow a little bit easier. And it helps us concentrate more. It helps us focus. If you have a big exam coming up anytime, if you have a big deadline you need to work, anything that might push you into that sort of fight or flight mode, seeing if you can take a few of these. Obviously, there will be certain situations where we have to engage that fight or flight mode. Like if we're driving a car and a deer is running out in front of it, we have to put the brake. And that's kind of the adrenaline, the cortisol is helping us there. So obviously there's certain situations where we need it. But in most situations in our day-to-day lives, we don't need to be in the sympathetic nervous system. We can really benefit from coming into that calm, rest and digest mode. Hope that makes sense. I talked a lot. I talked fast. There's a lot of things I wanted to try and convey there. We got just like half a minute left. So if any of you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise, if there's anything you want to ask later, you can always find me. I have a website that's called juliehavelund.com. I think it's in my bio as well. So you can always find me there, and I'd love to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, with that in mind, I hope you have a really good rest of your day. If you're sticking around for other sessions, I hope you enjoy them. I'm going to be around later for a session at 2:40, talking about my arts practice. So quite different, but I'd love to see you there. Thank you so much for joining, guys, and I hope you have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.